Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Until Dawn. Yes, made the logo too big for the video, so
I
just
like it. It's right in here. It feels real personal. In your face.
disregard that. Yeah, disregard that. Man, this is a movie that I can tell you I was pretty excited for. I was a big fan of the game. Admittedly, I was a very late adopter to PlayStation. I was an Xbox kid growing up. So when I got my Xbox or my PlayStation 4, this game was like maybe a couple months old. So I remember I got it on a Black Friday deal. And I just will always remember sitting down and playing this with my friends. What an experience it was. I mean, it's one of those things where you watch it and the game itself feels like a movie. It feels like a TV show. It feels really cinematic. It's really well done. And I loved the story and all the little elements they put together. So when we get to this movie and you have the likes of David F. Sandberg tackled to it, I went in very, very positive. Luke, what's your experience with Until Dawn before heading into the movie?
A bit mixed, actually. When this got announced, I know we both had talked about it. We're rather excited about it. And I'm not a video game guy. This one I only knew of. I saw it through osmosis, really. My wife decided to play this one when it had been out. And I watched her play some of it, and I thought it was rather interesting. It was one of those games that really intrigued me. I was really invested in it. I think it had a great atmosphere, had a great story behind it. We're suckers for Wendigo stories. We don't see them
Oh
that
yeah.
often. And when they're done well, like the game, it's just something where you want to live in that space for as long as you can. So when this got announced, I was extremely excited. David F. Sandberg attached. I mean, lights out for me was such an unexpected surprise when I had flipped that one on. Didn't really have any expectations going into it. It's one of my favorite films of that year. Annabelle Creation,
Yeah.
a film, the original Annabelle, I had checked out on and didn't have any high hopes for Annabelle Creation, but that one is my favorite in the Annabelle series there.
One
So
of my
this one,
favorite Conjurings, I must say too. I
yes,
would put that up there as one of the best, probably top five.
absolutely. Just such a complete film. And then I'm even a fan of Shazam. So,
Hmm.
I had David F. Sandberg, he has my vote. I had confidence. And then the trailer came out. And I went, I don't know if I was really expecting this. It just didn't have that feeling that I was expecting for Until Dawn. So going into the theater, I was rather hesitant. It had the makings of a great film, but visually seeing that, it just did not hit the mark for me.
Yeah, and for me being such a big fan of the game and loving David F. Sandberg, that's something you and I both share because again, he's somebody who comes from the same realm that we're in right now, where it's like he was a YouTube guy, made short films, got one that took off the ground. That's the age-old story. Everybody wants it. It's the Cinderella story. So of course, I love supporting him. I didn't see Shazam 2. No hate against him, just not really into that sect of the DC universe at that time. And but I've seen the rest of his work, and I do think he's a very well meaning, very competent filmmaker, I should say. I think that he's definitely shown some growth. But I gotta be completely honest here when I say that Until Dawn is a complete snooze fest. This movie to me just I was positive. I gotta admit, I was very positive going in on the take. I know you were hesitant of it. Evan was hesitant of it. Even Alex, like we all talked about it on Beyond the Splatter Graves at one point. And I was the only one who was like, "Hey, I'm looking forward to this." And I probably should have listened to you guys because yeah, this movie feels like the tropes of Until Dawn, being the characters are all kind of generic, tropey, slasher horror movie characters. That works for that game. I think it works really well for something like Cabin in the Woods. I don't think they did anything interesting with these people at all. They didn't do anything to make them. And I will say the tropey characters of Until Dawn in the game still feel like people. They still feel like they have some like groundedness to them, as to where they just feel like full-blown characters. And I gotta say, I didn't attach myself to any of them. And that is just one piece of what I found to be a very disappointing film.
Yeah, I think when you go into this, the first thing you're going to notice is the cast, and I kept hoping they were gonna get some sort of backstory, some sort of connective tissue that was really going to make us feel for these characters and feel invested in the story. We don't get that. They just stick with the tropes and they don't really progress these characters. You know, you kind of get a little bit of a backstory of a motivation for how the story works and what they're working toward. But that's really, you only get this grain, really, of just this little grain of story. And that's really it. We really don't expand upon anything. We don't really have any emotional moments. At least you're not invested in these characters to try and feel any sort of emotion for them. And, you know, this is a film that really doubled down on the kind of gimmick of this kind of going back in time and redoing everything, you know, redoing the last 24 hours of that night. And that's really what you get here. There isn't really much further than that. And it was rather disappointing. You know, that was my hesitancy when I had seen the trailer of this gimmick that they were going to do and the cast just I didn't feel anything. I was hoping, you know, as we got into that half hour mark that things were going to pick up and I was somehow, you know, going to flip the switch and really enjoyed the story, but overall, it just maintains what you see in that trailer and doesn't go any further beyond that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you know, you set up this idea that I really liked. I thought, hey, if we're gonna do this, I know people get upset when, like, I don't understand this part necessarily. I'm kind of on the opposite side of this, where it's like people get upset when you don't exactly adapt the game beat by beat. For something like Until Dawn, it made perfect sense to me to kind of take the DNA of it, the elements that people like about it, and to kind of tell your own little narrative that still maybe connects to the universe. It's just one of those things where it's like I get why you're doing that because the game's already basically a movie, and it's just what they did. I honest to God, I've been rattling with this all day. We saw this last night, and I just think that this was something that on paper sounds like a really good idea. Like, ooh, 24 hours, it resets, it's a different story. Cause like, you know, the makers, I think it's is it Supermassive Games, I think made this. They made the Dark Pictures games, which, you know, are other horror stories, very similar setup to Until Dawn. And I thought, hey, that's a really cool way to kind of tie all this together and kind of have some fun with it. Show us some interesting things. And I just felt like what we ended up getting really just resulted in just generic jump scares. You know, there's one interesting element to this that I by the end of it I got tired of because I felt like it was overdone. And I just overall I found myself being extremely underwhelmed by just about every threat they encounter. And by the end of it, I was just like, okay, let's just wrap this up. I'm sorry. I wasn't enjoying my time. I kind of sat there and just felt like this isn't the worst movie in the world. This isn't something that like, you know, I would say is really poorly made. It's just poorly written and I think just undercooked as a whole.
Undercooked is the perfect word here. You know, I'm on the same side as you when it comes to video game adaptations or anything like that, where it doesn't need to be verbatim what we've seen already. And video games are just becoming more and more cinematic. Like you said, they feel like films, you know, but it seems like with the more cinematic they're coming, the bigger struggle it is to even adapt those video games. It's never been an easy task, apparently, since what the 80s and 90s. They've never really gotten it right, maybe with the exceptions of a couple. I can't even think of them, but you know, it's such a hard task. And I thought Until Dawn was. I had this discussion with my wife on the way home from the theater where I don't know necessarily if that gimmick was the right idea to double down on for an Until Dawn film, where it's like you look at the film, it's got a great atmosphere. Or I apologize, the game, it's got a great atmosphere. Yeah, the characters are kind of tropey, but I think they work for what they're the story that they're telling us. So I think you just needed that blueprint of pull out like five of the ideas. What makes Until Dawn a great video game? And just work from that blueprint. But it was like they had this concept. They wanted to have some sort of fun with it. Unfortunately, it did not turn out to be as much fun as I thought it could have been. I thought you look at a film like Cabin in the Woods, and I struggle with that film. It's never been my favorite. I know a lot of people look at it really positive. I struggle with connecting with the characters on that just because of the concept of that film, and we're kind of dealing in tropes and things. So it never really pushes beyond me feeling for these characters in a situation, but it is a horror comedy. So I think it works for what that film is. This one, I, it just, there was no real connection with anything. And I thought maybe we're going to get some sort of variation. You look at Cabin in the Woods and they have a lot of fun, different characters that they implement. In this one, I thought maybe we were going to get something like that, at least to kind of have some fun with it. And we never really got there. It just becomes extremely repetitive. And there's some good gore in it, certainly. But,
Yeah.
I think beyond that, the story just gets so tiresome. And there are no real stakes in this because we're kind of replaying the night over and over. And I just felt that. It was like, okay, here we go again. We're flipping the switch and we're redoing the events in a different sort of way. But it was just kind of so repetitive. And that being the gimmick, I think you have to implement a lot of fun. But this one, you were so aware of the gimmick, how repetitive it became, that it just became, by the end of it, I went out of this film.
Yeah, man. I found myself, even with a returning cast member who I think is in the trailer, but I don't want to give too much away. I ultimately felt like, going in, hey, maybe they'll do something kind of neat with that, and maybe again find a way to almost bring some more backstory to said character. And I felt like they were completely wasted. I feel like they're just kind of set dressing, and that's unfortunately what a lot of this movie feels like. It just feels like, hey, like, ooh, I'm excited to play with this. Like, ooh, what if we put this in it? And it's like they do it, but they don't make anything all that impactful. And the Wendigos are a huge part of Until Dawn, and I thought that the video game, they did a really good job of showing those creepy, monstrous, like creatures and what they turn into. And I got to say, I really liked what we saw and how that was getting set up. And overall, I really commend them for leaning on practical effects with them. But again, I think like the thing about the Wendigos in that game is they are kind of used sparingly. They're used as more like kind of more of a third act threat that has been a mystery this entire time. We don't necessarily know what's going on, and they're really overused here. They're extremely overused, and they don't feel special like they did in the game. I don't know. I feel like, again, this was a really good idea on paper. This was a really cool way to do this, but again, it just feels like maybe you needed to sit with that idea for a while longer. Maybe you needed to see that, hey, this isn't quite going to work the way you think. And I think a big piece of that comes to the writing. We didn't know this. I didn't know this, certainly, going into the movie. We actually, unfortunately, made a joke at the gentleman's expense. But, I have to be honest. You guys know how I feel about our boy, Mr. Doberman, Gary Doberman. Yes, for those of you who aren't aware, that is the fella who wrote and directed Annabelle Comes Home, the Nun movies, the most recent Salem's Lot, which I was actually interested in and actually thought was pretty decent. This just falls into those exact same tropes that we get from, of course, your stereotypical Conjuring, Annabelle movies, The Nun. It really does feel like we're only maybe a slight notch above that. And I think that slight notch only comes because you have somebody like a David F. Sandberg behind the camera who knows how to, build some tension here and there, but knows how to also use the camera in very interesting ways to kind of, accentuate some of the horror. It's all there, but it's just the material is not strong enough.
Yeah, the screenplay there is certainly weak. This is co-writing venture as well with Blair Butler, who, if you're not familiar, had done like Polaroid and The Invitation from a few years ago, and was at Hellfest, I believe, co-wrote that. But not strong films in terms of writing from the duo here. So I think I didn't know that going in, but I think knowing that going in, I probably would have been even more hesitant, just because there are continuous problems in those screenplays, especially when it comes to character, when it comes to the actual events themselves. There always is just so much left on the table, and a lot of those films, I never have a connection with the characters. So, it seems right on brand for the team that they had put on, laying the foundation for this film, and it's so evident as we're watching this because it's something where, man, we're playing into the tropes, but none of the tropes are fun. We're redoing events and nothing seems interesting. I think when we first get through that first initial event, I look at that and I always mention potential in films and to kind of play this film more straight in terms of the narrative and not really having that kind of gimmick behind it. There's some rather gory and tense, I think, slasher sequences, and they kind of throw that away. And I wish they would have doubled down on that and really kind of taken that element that we see in that sequence and really use that for the rest of the narrative of the film, implementing Wendigos and being more of a looming a specter looming, throughout the film. I think could have been rather interesting, really would have amped up the atmosphere for this because David F. Sandberg, I mean, you look at a film like Lights Out or Annabelle Creation, he excels at telling these horror stories. After Shazam and the debacle of that second one, and he had said he was coming back to horror, we were so excited about that. I think we mentioned it
We were
somewhere.
thrilled.
To really come back to Until Dawn like this was rather underwhelming, I think. Now, this film, I think I can't say that I would turn this on as a passive watch. I think this film best excels. I could see this being turned on at a Halloween party just to come in and
Yeah.
out of and have fun with some of the kills, just because the connective tissue isn't there. The fun in the story is not there. But I think if you have a group of people that are randomly doing things and just decide to look at the TV during a random gory sequence, I think that's where you can have fun with this. I think this has to be in a group setting. Unfortunately, we had a very negative theatrical experience with this one as
Oh
well.
God, don't remind me.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was tough.
so it was kind of the perfect storm for seeing this one. But yeah, I think this one's going to be rough to even go back as a passive watch for me.
I agree. Yeah, this is one that unfortunately I just have no desire to really find myself sitting down and watching it. And I agree with you. I'm not going to sit back and say that this is a huge strike on David F. Sandberg's career. I just I honestly, if I had to say anything that I have to throw against him, I felt Shazam in this. I felt the big studio like kind of DNA that you get from working on big projects like that in this. And that's like the difference between something like what Ryan Coogler just did, where it's like, yeah, he did 2 movies, which are Marvel films. And, I'd say the first Black Panther has a little bit more of that uniqueness. Wakanda Forever, again, kind of tough, but he completely subverted that. He completely got away from it and really felt like he brought something that was wholly his own. As to where this definitely feels like he's kind of hamstrung a little bit. He feels like I don't think this is full blown David F. Sandberg, and that's me giving him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, he could have another horror movie come out, and then it's just a slow trickle of just, man, I wish we could get back to that. Sometimes it happens, but this one for me is certainly one that I was excited to see. I wanted to really like it. I love the games. I enjoy David F. Sandberg as a whole, and unfortunately, this is one I won't be revisiting. I don't think I would. I don't see a reason why I would even want to throw this on. And I'm not even saying that it's like the worst movie of the year or anything. It's just forgettable. It's just disposable. And that's just not something that I think myself, you, or anybody who watches us is really looking for right now. This video is sponsored by our good friends over at Abracadabra NYC, your one-stop shop for all your horror needs and necessities. By following our link in the description, you can see all that they have to offer, from horror collectibles, costumes, accessories, magic masks, and so much more. And if you find yourself in the New York area, please stop by their physical location. They have 3 floors of everything you see in the store and a unique, memorable experience to go along with it. So whether you're looking for something creepy, cutesy, or just super cool, they've got you covered at Abracadabra NYC.
Yeah, I think there's an expectation, especially being a fan of the game and how high quality that game is, to go into the film and have something that is at least reminiscent of that. It doesn't have to be on par quality, but at least in the conversation of, okay, there was an attempt here. to tell that story and stay true to that story. And while there are elements here, I don't think anyone that's a big fan of the Until Dawn games is going to be satisfied for what they do give us, just because it is such a variation of the source material, and I don't think it was done well. So even if it was a variation but done well, I think you could have some fun with it. But this one, it just doesn't work. The characters aren't there. The atmosphere, I did not feel tension in this, and I thought maybe I would, especially with the concept from the video game. But it just kind of was really void for me. Other than some interesting gore set pieces, even the practical effects for me, I think some of them work. But like you said, they were overused. I felt sometimes like I was in a haunted house with some of the
Yeah.
what they were doing and what they were showing. So, even that got a little tiresome for me, which is rather unusual. So this one was, really hard to find some redeeming qualities. Again, it's not a dumpster fire of a film. It just is really underwhelming. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna go proceed with caution on this one. I don't see myself revisiting. I'm gonna treat this one as David S. Sandberg kind of getting back into, this is a warm up to get into a real horror film. I know that's probably terrible to say because people are spending their money out in the theater, but this one is something that, yeah, if you're looking for the game, if you're looking for interesting horror film, I don't think Until Dawn's gonna be for you. This one, probably wait till streaming to really see what this one's about, because I don't think you're gonna walk out of this one too happy. So proceed with caution for me.
I gotta agree with you. I'm going with proceed with caution. It's just you took all the words out of my mouth. I can't expound upon that anymore. It's just disappointing. I hope David F. Sandberg brings back some of that magic that we've seen before. Go back to doing something smaller. Don't do a huge studio property. Do something for Shudder. Do something for IFC. I'd love to see him tackle that. Like really him going back to writing and producing his own stuff. I think that would be, or writing and directing, I should say. I think that would be really, really solid if he did that. And we'll see. I mean, I definitely am in that camp with him still. I still think he's competent, but could be the sign of just something just not working. I don't know. Again, I'm walking away from this very disappointed, going with proceed with caution. Again, not the worst movie of the year, but just not doing enough for me to really sit there and say, hey, go out and see this. Go see Sinners. Go watch some stuff that we got, like The Ugly Stepsister and a couple other fun things on Shudder right now. I just think that Until Dawn is just going to give you, unfortunately, more of the same when it comes to what we're kind of tired of when it comes to generic studio horror. So
Yeah, very much generic studio horror. At one point I was like, this could have been a Blumhouse venture, and
yes.
it just
Yes, it could have.
it is right there on par with those sorts of films. So rather underwhelming. Yeah, this one is not a recommendation to go spend your hard-earned money at the theater this weekend.
Absolutely not, unfortunately, but we do have a lot of great stuff up on the channel, guys. Thank you for watching this review. Let us know what you thought of Until Dawn. Are you still going to go check it out? I absolutely understand if our review is not going to completely ward you off from seeing it at the theater. I know there's a lot of people who are big fans of these games who are probably going to go out and support it. Absolutely do so. But just know that, unfortunately, this is not the adaptation I think we were all hoping for. So, at least in our opinion. But yeah, other than that, lots of great stuff up on the channel. Check it out. Luke just put out a list this week. Pretty fun stuff, talking about some true crime stuff, some pretty nasty, upsetting things. And yeah, we got a lot of other stuff like our Havoc review with Tom Hardy, another movie that doesn't quite meet the highest of marks, but a lot more fun, I should say. And yeah, we got a lot more stuff on the way. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live.